right, it is time to begin class. Glad you're here, and if you're watching from home, we're glad you're here too. We are continuing our study of the Pursuit of Holiness. It's our 9th week, believe it or not. We got a few left, so see if we can pursue it a little bit more tonight. Real quick review. We've defined holiness. We've worked on understanding it a little bit better. Looked at Jesus, our example. Talked about how we pursue holiness. It's a two-pronged attack by the Spirit and you. We have a responsibility, and the Spirit helps us with it as we pursue holiness. And last week we introduced the concept of the world system, and hopefully we're got to understand the world system a little bit. We'll keep working on that for the next week or two. Just a quick review of that. We said that the Bible uses the word world at least 3 different ways. Talks about the world, the planet, the universe that God created. Talks about the world of people that Jesus died for. And talks about being friends with the world is hatred toward God. So it's obviously not friendship with the planet, not friendship with the world of people. The world is something different there. And the way we define that vocabulary word is the system of values and attitudes that are accepted by a society which does not love God. Jesus said he wasn't of this world, and he didn't expect his followers to be of this world. So what he's talking about there, and the way I defined it anyway, is the system that the world accepts, the way it thinks about things, the way it values things, the way it treats everything. Is different in the world than it is in God's realm. And the way we illustrated that was we talked about price tags, that everything has a price tag. You go in a store and you can tell what something's worth, or at least what it costs. It may not be worth that, but it's what it costs, and you decide if you want to pay that or not. The world system, what it does is takes God's price tags and rearranges them. That's at its best. God has established values for things. He said some things are good for us, some things are bad for us. He said some things are very valuable and some things are very costly. And what the world system does is switches those price tags. Tells us that this is more valuable than God thought it was, or this is less valuable. At its worst, what the world system does is puts a value, a high value, on things that God says are a negative value. God says some things are really, really bad for you, and the world says, no, that's good for you. God says some things will cause death, and the world says, no, that's good. And we'll look at some examples of that tonight. So that's the world system that we're talking about it. And we closed with this verse from Colossians that we're going to start with tonight. Colossians 2:8 says, "See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ." So what that verse says is that the world system is aligned against us and wants to take people who love God and try to follow God's values. The world system wants to trick you into reading the wrong price tag. They want to take you captive. They want to deceive you. And they do that according to the elemental spirits of the world. That's the world system. The values and attitudes that the world that doesn't love God puts on things they will try to get you to buy into those things. So as we pursue holiness, this is one way to think of it, is that we're under attack, if you will. The world wants to capture us, deceive us, and get us to follow their values. So I would propose, using a sports analogy, that if we want to make sure we don't get taken captive, if we want to make sure we aren't deceived, we need a game plan. If the world is arrayed against us, then we ought to have a game plan on how we handle that. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is a sports analogy. And I know many of you are not sports junkies, but the concept applies to any problem. Anything that is wrong and against us, or anything that's troubling you in your life, if you think through this process that we're going to go through, you'll see it applies. The problem that we're dealing with in this class is that the world system wants to capture us, deceive us, trick us, defeat us. It wants us to not follow God anymore. Holiness is being set apart for God. So we've got these opponents, if you will, and we need a game plan. Since March Madness just ended, I put a basketball play on the board. If you watched March Madness, which most of you probably watched a piece of it anyway, you heard a lot, especially when the commentators were talking, you heard a lot about game plans. Okay. Team X is against Team Y. What's Team Y's game plan? What are they going to do? And you heard about, well, this team needs to slow it down against this team, or this team needs to speed it up. This team needs to double team, or they need to play man to man, or they need to play zone. Their game plan is to go inside all the time. Their game plan is to shoot three-pointers. Okay, that's all before the game starts. Somebody's made a game plan, and some of the game plans are proved to be better than others. But that's the concept I want to follow through with tonight. So if we need a game plan, I'd say the first thing we got to do is analyze the other team. Okay? Now, I have in my history of sports heard a few coaches that claim they don't worry about what the other team's going to do. If they run their system as best they can, they don't need to worry about the other team, that it'll work, as long as they just do their game plan. That's pretty rare. Any sport, any coach, any team first starts off with analyzing the other team. What's this team do? What is their game plan? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are their plays? For instance, when a coach gets done with one game and he's got another game coming up in a week or 2 days or whatever, what's he immediately go back to the office and start doing? Starts watching film of the other team. He watches their games. He analyzes what they do and how they do it. That's where he starts. He's got to figure out what they're doing before he can make his game plan. Okay? What's a coach do at halftime usually? He goes in and says, okay, they're beating us, and I figured out what they're doing. You know, they're running this play over and over, and we got to figure out how to stop that play. Okay, so analyzing the other team, first step. When I was thinking of these illustrations, some of your Chiefs fans, and I remembered the Chiefs Bengals game, the AFC Championship this year. And if you're a real Chiefs fan, you don't want to think about it, but remember, the first half was completely different than the second half. Okay, the first half, the Chiefs kind of did whatever they wanted and did real well. The second half, they came out and they couldn't do anything. Okay, what changed? Well, the Bengals changed what they were doing somehow. And Mahomes or nobody could figure it out. Okay, he looked lost. It wasn't what he was used to seeing. He knew what the game plan was. He had analyzed the other team in the first half. And the second half, they acted differently. Okay, and he didn't do well. And the Chiefs didn't do well. So knowing what the other team's doing is the secret to, or the first step at least, in making our game plan. Now, the absolute best preparation to play another team, to analyze the other team, would be if you could steal their playbook. You know, I'm not saying it's ethical, I'm just saying it'd be really good. If you had their playbook and you could see everything they did and how they did it, you could prepare for them better, right? Okay? So in our analyzing the other team, it would be really cool if we had the world system's playbook. Fortunately, we do. The Holy Spirit stole it. He gave it to us. The Holy Spirit said, here's what the world system will run. Here's their playbook. And he put it in 1 John chapter 2. So 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 and 16, John says this: do not love the world. Okay, that's the world system. Don't fall in love with the world system or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Then he says this: for all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. Okay. Now, sometimes we just read that, and if we read it in the older translation, it's the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life. Everybody knows that. But sometimes we don't stop and think what that is. And what John tells us, he says, if you're analyzing the other team, here is all that is in the world. The desire of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, and the pride of life. What John is telling us is that the world system, Satan, only has three plays. He's only got three ways that he does things. That's all that is in the world, is these three plays. Okay? So we've got the opponent's playbook. We know what he's going to run. And I know that's kind of hard to believe. We think, well, Satan's got to be trickier than that. It's surely more complicated than that. And in some ways, it's a little more complicated. But in general, or not in general, but in fact, Satan's only got three plays. And I've said that before in classes, and people kind of look like, I don't know if I buy that or not. And my challenge is, you think of a sin that doesn't fall under one of those three categories. And when you think of it, you come tell me. I'm still waiting. Nobody's ever given me one that doesn't fall in one of those three categories. So that's all the world's got. Three plays. Okay. Now, we stole the playbook. We read it. We say, look, they only got three plays. Desire of the flesh, desire of the eyes, and the pride of life. Well, since this is a big game, we want to make sure. So we might watch some film and see Yeah, there's that play, and there's that play. And we don't see any others. We would have confidence then that we know what the other team might throw at us. So, continuing that analogy, let's look at a couple of game films. And what we're going to analyze tonight is the two biggest games that the world system ever played. Okay? Big game number one was the world system versus Eve. So we're going to read the replay of that game in Genesis 3, verses 1 through 6, and just watch for the plays. See what happens. Okay, so let's start. Genesis 3, verse 1. He, the serpent, said to the woman, "Did God actually say, 'You shall not eat of any tree in the garden'?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, 'You shall not eat of the fruit of that tree that's in the midst of the garden. Neither shall you touch it, lest you die.'" All right, now, this is a big game. Satan's got a new thing here. He's got humans on earth. They love God. They're in a perfect garden. And his goal is to get them to buy into the world system and quit loving God, to disobey God. Okay? So he starts out, and the first thing he does is question the price tags. He said, "Did God really tell you that was bad?" And she says, "Yeah." She knew what the price tag said. So she said, "Yeah." He said, "We can eat of all the trees except that one." Okay, so let's continue the game film. Verse 4. But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Okay, that's backtracking a little bit to last week, but what did Satan just do? The worst thing the world system does is not just switch the price tags, but assign a positive value to something that God said was negative. And Eve knew it. Eve told him, "Yeah, if we eat of that tree, we'll die." And Satan said, "No, you won't. It'll be good for you. You'll be wise like God. It's not just not bad for you, it's very, very valuable." Okay, so it's the way he operates. Okay, so he messed the price tags up there, and then we go to the key part of the game, verse 6. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. Okay, now we'll come back to those in just a little while, but for right now, just notice that there's three of them. Okay? Now, into the game film, win for Satan. He's 1-0. Okay, he won this one. He used the system. Eve went for it. Satan was successful. He got them kicked out of the garden. He broke their relationship with God. He did all of that. And then God started his plan, which he already knew about, but he started his plan to get things back together, which eventually leads us to big game number 2. And this is the world system, Satan, versus Jesus. Okay, if we watch this game film in Matthew chapter 4, watch again for Satan's plays. See what he does. Okay, Matthew 4, 1 through 11. This one doesn't take place in a perfect garden. This one takes place in the desert. Jesus had gone off by himself before his ministry begins, and this is verse 1 of Matthew 4. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It's written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Continuing in verse 5. Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it's written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone." And Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Verse 8. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, "All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. Okay, there's obviously lots of sermons in there. We can analyze how Jesus dealt with that, all the temptations and all of that, but that's not what we're looking for right now. We're looking for Satan's game plan, see how the world system works. We're checking it against his playbook to see if he's really only got 3 plays. So let's summarize what happened in this game. And just taking verses, and actually a little bit out of order, but we've got all 3 main parts. First one is, after fasting 40 days and nights, he was hungry. Okay? And then Satan, actually this is the third one, but I put it second. Then Satan showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and he said, "All these I'll give to you, if you'll fall down and worship me." And the third one, he set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and he said, "If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it's written that God will save you." All right, once again, remember there's 3 there. Notice there's 3 plays. Jesus countered every one, and that's another lesson about how he countered them with Scripture and all of that. He just went back to the original price tag. He said, "No, the original price tag is this. I'm not buying this switched price tag." Okay, so second big game's over. That's a loss for Satan. Satan's 1-1 in big games right now. Okay, so now let's put all that together and see if our analysis matches up with the playbook. The playbook said, for all that's in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but from the world. So 1 John says, here's the 3 plays: flesh, eyes, and pride. Let's check out the 2 games we watched. Versus Eve, what led to her downfall? The fruit looked good to eat. It was pleasant to the eye, and it'd make you wise like God. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. On Jesus, did Satan come up with something new and different, or did he stick to the playbook? When Jesus was hungry, he said, "Why don't you eat? That'd taste good. You could do that." Then he took him up and he said, "Look at all the world's kingdoms and all the riches and all the material stuff. I'll give you all of that. You can rule over that." And the third one, he said, put him up on a pedestal, and he said, "Why don't you jump off and prove that you're the Son of God. Flesh, eyes, and pride. Okay? It's the only three plays he's got. He runs them over and over. He runs them in a little different varieties sometimes. He camouflages them a little bit different, but he runs the same three plays over and over. Some of them work better on some people. You know, I sometimes think about Jesus' three temptations, and I think, okay, maybe, I mean, if I'd already fasted for 40 days, maybe I could say, nah, I'll skip that one. I don't need any bread right now. And maybe I could say, I don't need all the kingdoms of the world. I got more than I need right now, so nope, I'm not going for that one. But I sometimes think if he put me up there and said, all right, prove to me who you say you are, I'd probably say, I'll show you who I am. You know, I'm the Son of God. Okay? My pride would probably get me there. Okay? And so different things tempt different people, and we'll talk about that more next week. But the point is, our analysis proves that the playbook has only got three plays. It's the only thing he uses, even in the really big games. So we know what the opponent does now. We've analyzed it. We know what he's got up his sleeve and how he goes about it and what he does. So remember, we're trying to make a game plan. So we've got step one done. We've analyzed the other team. The world system has three plays, only three plays. It's the only way they'll come at you. Desire of the flesh, desire of the eyes, pride of life. Now we got to, once we've analyzed them, what's a coach do? He sits down and says, all right, here's how we counter that. They run these three plays over and over. So here's how we're going to defend. Here's how we're going to attack their defense. Here's what we're going to do. Okay? So we know the three plays. We just got to prepare. When, going back to football here, when the quarterback is under the center and ready to start the play, what's he doing? What's he watching? You football fans know he's looking over the defense. He's saying, I know they got these three plays, or 5 plays, or 10 plays, or whatever, and I've studied the game films enough, I know what they look like, and right now they're lined up in play number 6. I know that's what they're going to run. Okay? He's analyzed what they got, and he's formulating what he's going to do about it. If the play he had called isn't the right one for that defense, he'll make an audible. He'll say, no, here's how we're going to attack that. We're going to change. Okay? That's how it works. You analyze the opponent, you formulate your attack, then you attack. So we are fortunate. I mean, NFL teams got playbooks that thick. You got to learn a whole lot of plays if you're a quarterback. Holy Spirit said we only got to memorize 3. It's only 3 out there. So once we get those figured out, we can handle it better. Okay. So what's going to be our defense? What's going to be our offense against Satan's 3 attacks? We know what the world system is. It's changing price tags. It's trying to get us to do something that God says is bad for us, or choose something that's worse for us than something that's good for us, get us to choose the wrong thing. And the only 3 ways he does that is desire of the flesh, desire of the eye, and the pride of life. So we sit down then and think through this and decide, all right, how we're going to handle this. So let's talk about flesh a little bit. Just kind of think through what Satan does there and how he does it. The desire of the flesh, older translation called lust of the flesh. Trouble with that is we usually think of lust as just one thing. Lust isn't just one thing, it's desire. It's a desire for anything. And we all desire different things. But the three categories are what the game plan is. So the desire of the flesh is about our appetites. And not our just strictly our stomach appetites, although that's one of them, but any of our appetites, our fleshly appetites, what feels good to us, what gives us pleasure. Okay, that's the desires of the flesh. One of the world system's slogans about that used to be on some bumper stickers a long time ago. If it feels good, do it. Okay? That's what the world says. Okay? What is that? What play is that? It's the desire of the flesh. If it feels good, do it. Okay? Now, God's price tags don't say that. He changes that a little bit, but that's what the world says. If you've got a desire of the flesh, fulfill it. Well, that play is run over and over in all kinds of situations. For instance, God's not against sexual pleasure. He provided for that. In fact, he invented it. He provided for it to be fulfilled in marriage. Okay? When the world system sees that price tag, what do? The world system changes price tags and says, you telling me you're going to stay a virgin till you're married? That's suspect. Something's wrong with you. Okay, just changing price tags. That's all there is. You're in a marriage and it's kind of boring. Well, how do you fix that? Well, the world says, have an affair. Yeah. That's how the world system works, through this play, this desire of the flesh. And it doesn't matter what it's about. It doesn't matter if it's about sex or gluttony or pampering yourself in some other way. It just gets you to do something that feels good, that changes the price tag on something that God said wasn't right or is less valuable. Get you to fall for that play and buy into something that the world's selling just to change what God has said. So flesh gets some of us. Okay? And it's different for everybody. That's why Satan attacks differently. Okay? We'll talk about more about temptation next week, but we're all tempted by different things. But within the flesh, we're also tempted by different things. Okay? My favorite illustration of that is one time, a long time ago, we had a gentleman called Richard Taylor that had been a heroin addict and done all sorts of bad things and gotten all sorts of bad trouble, and was visited by a Church of Christ preacher in the prison and gave his life to Christ. And when he got out, he spent his rest of his short life, because he had abused himself so much, telling teenagers and other people about his life story and the dangers of all the things he did. And we had him at Northside, and he stayed at our house, and great fellow. And after Sunday night, we had a teen devo where he was talking, had all the teens lined up in a big circle, and he was taking questions. And I was sitting right beside him, and one of the teens said, "Would you do heroin again?" Do you want to do heroin again? And I'm sitting there, I think that's the dumbest question I ever heard. After everything he's told us he's been through, no way he would want to do heroin. And Richard answered and said, if I could be assured I'd get to heaven and my family would get to heaven, I'd do it right now. You could, fill this auditorium with heroin, and I would not be tempted. Okay, that doesn't bother me. I got no desire for that. And Satan knows that, and he's never tempted me with heroin. he tries other things. Okay? But it's all through the flesh. And that's just 1/3 of his playbook. Okay, second part of the playbook, desire of the eyes. Okay? Things, the apple, the fruit, looked good to Eve. She said, that looks good. That is pleasant to the eye. And that's what desire of the eye is about, things that look good to us. Actually, it's not really the eye, it's the mind. It's things that we see that we covet is another word for this. That looks like I would like to have that. Now, it may be intertwined a little bit, because like Eve, she said it looked good, but it also would taste good. Okay? So the lust of the eye is basically covetousness. We see something that we want, desire. Okay? And that's all Madison Avenue does, by the way, is work on play number 2. Everything is about getting you to want something that you don't have. Getting you to think what you have isn't good enough. I'd rather have this. That looks better to me. Okay? It's the way advertising, all of it works. Make you dissatisfied with what you have. A lot of times it's riches, it's material things. And that's why Satan, when he ran play 2 on Jesus, he took him up and he said, look at all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, all the riches. You could have all that. Okay? That's play number 2. That's the way he works. That's a trick. It's deceit, like our original Colossians verse. Matthew 13:22 says, the deceitfulness of riches chokes out the gospel. Okay? Somebody that hears the good news, comes to Jesus, doesn't last long because the deceitfulness of riches chokes them out. Okay, they fall for play number 2. All right, let's hurry here. Play number 3, the pride of life. This is our humanness, our ego. We want recognition. We want influence. We want power. We want ambition. We got pride. Okay? That gets us. That's play number 3. Gets us sometimes. So as we formulate our attack, that's one thing we can do is recognize how he's attacking us right now. So using play 1, 2, or 3. And we know our weaknesses, so we can avoid certain temptations. We'll talk about that next week. Okay, next week we are going to get deeper into this. Going to talk about how temptation works. We're going to analyze temptation a little bit deeper, but now you know what the 3 plays are. You can watch for them this week. See if when you think about, I'd kind of like to do that, but I know it's wrong for some reason. Which plays are running on you? Think about it a little bit. All right, we'll see you next week with how temptation works.